Yeah, and for all of us that are so used to making all these really, hop forward beers and everything like that. I mean, these are real malt forward. This is the real time to flex those malt muscles. And one of the things I love of what you talked about with those malts that are in there, that range of Munich malt can kind of have, that bread crusty, toasty thing going on. That Vienna, I don't know about you, but sometimes Vienna can be a little bit more, maybe a little bit more into the nutty range. And then you get some of those a little bit of caramel malt in there, and it's just a nice arc of flavor, man. It's awfully nice. So one of my thoughts with a beer like this is kind of the tie-in between finishing gravity on these beers, and then how you're balancing that with IBU. So where does this beer finish out for you? Just ballpark even.
So we like to keep it below 3. It's usually around 2.8.
Yeah. You're telling me things I love
that's
to
Plato
hear.
For all of you
specific
gravity nuts out there. I'm throwing you for a loop. We work in degrees Plato.
Yeah, so I mean, really, you're looking anywhere from 10, 10, 10, 12 in that range if you're talking specific gravity, and that's music to my ears. Just from a personal standpoint, when you take those beers into that range, you don't have a tremendous amount of sweetness that you need to conquer with that bitterness, right? And I think that's the thing we always talk on here. I think that's one of the components to really elevating the drinkability of a beer, right? You don't have a ton of residual sweetness that's kind of bogging your palate down. You don't have to stack additional bitterness on top of it to balance out that sweetness. So you're not pounding the palate with all these things that's going to make a beer harder to drink, right? So yeah, this is all music to my ears. That's my preferred approach with those beers as well. And even when you're talking about the paler version, and sometimes, that paler version, that fest beer style, it's a little bit darker than Helles, maybe into golden a little bit, but that paler style almost has like this kind of like super Helles element to it, right? It's not like a double Helles or like we think IPA to double IPA, but it is a beefed up Helles a little bit. One thing that I'm curious about is when we talked about those 20 BU in Franz, is that all going in as like a boil hop? Are you reserving anything a little later in the kettle for stuff like that? What's kind of the approach there?
Yeah, we do a 10-minute addition. That's 10 minutes from knockout.
Sure.
So yeah, we do reserve a little bit to try to carry some hop character over. It's not just a bittering addition.
Yeah.
While minimal in the grand scheme of craft beer styles, it is still noticeable when you have a little bit of that noble spiciness and kind of hop character come through. So
definitely
a key thing about our version, which I left out, is that it's actually an ale.
Okay.
So yeah, we don't have a traditional fest beer or Oktoberfest, because obviously those are lagers.
Sure.
So in the early days, because they were moving so fast and couldn't make beer fast enough, rather than lager a beer for 2 months and do it the traditional way, they decided to throw the ale yeast at it. And knowing that in the future, we'll do the lager and switch it over, but it was so successful, and now it's become kind of a cult thing every year that we're like, well, people don't want us to mess with it, so we'll keep doing it as an ale.
Sure.
And we're not trying to fool anybody. It's called out as an ale on the can and everything, right? It's kind of our American craft spin on it.
I remember early on, I was making a Kolsch. It was cold fermented, but I mean, I was throwing a British strain at it because that's what I had in house, and I would start it at 60. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things. But I do think it speaks interestingly to, obviously stylistically, if you're really going to dive in on the stylistic side, you would want to throw something lager yeast wise at it. But the flip side is you can make a clean from an ester standpoint, right? Obviously micro too, but you can make a clean, you can make a very clean ale, and you end up almost getting into the conversation of what percentage of people are going to know, let alone care, right? And I think sometimes we overemphasize that element of it. And again, if you're coming at it from a stylistic standpoint, that's great. Like there's no issue with that. But yeah, you can definitely turn a beer like that in a clean fashion.